Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. Marco Rubio has been leading the charge in deporting a good number of students who are immigrants, who are activists, who are in some cases breaking the law in support of possible terrorist networks. A lot of people have had controversy with this because it is often in response to protests against the state of Israel. But I think the wider question is, why is anyone who hates our country going to universities in the United States? I think actually it opens up the larger question, why are so many foreign students so prominent in the United States when we have a population that is desperate for opportunity, desperate for the American dream, who is worried about other foreign competition working in, taking over jobs, taking over industries? Why are we spending American resources and allowing foreign students to, in many cases, dominate the enrollment at American universities? Joining me to discuss this today is somebody who has appeared in both the Federalist and the Blaze. He has his own Substack called Conquest Laws. It is Adam Johnston. Thanks for joining me, man.
Hey, man. How are you? Thanks for having me, Auron.
Doing well, doing well. So we're going to dive into a piece that is going to be appearing on the Blaze here in a moment that you wrote about the college crisis, especially with so many foreign students attending our universities. But before we do, let's hear from today's sponsor. Hey everybody, this episode of the Auron MacIntyre Show is proudly sponsored by Consumers Research. You've heard about Larry Fink and BlackRock and ESG and all the ways that they're ruining your life, making grocery stores more expensive, making video games more woke. Well, Consumers Research has spent the last 5 years making Larry's life hell, and they're just getting started. Their work and its consequences have been profiled in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and most recently, Fox Business reporter Charlie Gasparino wrote a whole chapter in his book, Go Woke, Go Broke, on how effective they've been at dismantling BlackRock's ESG patronage scheme. He's making Larry Fink lose that last bit of hair on his balding head, and you should follow Will's work on X so you can laugh along with him. His handle is at WILLHILD. So give him a follow. Again, that's at WILLHILD on X. All right, Adam. So like we were discussing, Marco Rubio has come out with a lot of fiery rhetoric. He's been pretty unapologetic about sending back people who he usually characterizes as terrorist sympathizers, people who certainly do not like the United States. But it has garnered a lot of pushback, again, because so many of the people who have had their visas revoked, who are students, have been involved in these anti-Israel protests. What do you think about the initial reaction about this strategy by the Trump administration of starting their deportations here and the type of message that sends to foreign students who might be coming to the United States?
Those are good questions. And I think the controversy kind of aligns with, as you stated in the beginning, you have the anti-Israel component of this. And if you have a lot of people on the right are going to be, like myself included, in terms of being American first, you really don't want to have the United States involved in any of these kinds of conflicts. So you'd rather not be involved in kind of subjecting people to I shouldn't say subjecting, but I should say suppressing the speech in this regard, because really this is something that America shouldn't really have a say in. Then on the flip side, you have the free speech component of this, which is people are saying, hey, we have a right to protest the government. We have the right to say that America really shouldn't be involved in this. But where Rubio comes in, and this is where I agree, because it really doesn't matter, in my opinion, and this is where I talk about in the piece, it doesn't matter whether you're pro-Israel, you sympathize with the Palestinian people, or you're critical of both. The issue is you have people coming into this country who, and this is Rubio's point, you have people coming into the country on student visas. They're here to learn. They're here to get an education. They're here for the privilege of accessing American universities. And then subsequently, what we're finding is a lot of these international students are getting involved in protest groups, getting involved in initially the pro-Palestinian cause, but then a lot of these pro-Palestinian groups overlap with a lot of anti-Americanism and the anti-settler colonial state narrative that goes along with a lot of these groups that undermine American values, American culture, and whatnot. And so Rubio is saying, hey, listen, if you're here to study, that's one thing. But if you're here to cause disruption, if you're here to cause any kind of commotion on campus, harass students, whether they're Jewish or otherwise, you violated the terms of the student visa. We can revoke that visa. We have that authority. And then subsequently, you're in the country illegally. And subsequently, you need to get out of the country. And I think in that sense, I think he's right.
Yeah, I have to echo your feelings on this. And I think the feelings of so many where we look at this and we say, okay, I don't want people in this country who hate my country. And if you're here on a student visa, you're here on our good graces, right? This is us extending, an invitation that is entirely benevolent. You come in here, you get to take these opportunities. If you're going to be doing that, you need to be on the best behavior. If I walk into someone's home, I don't just start, telling them I hate everything about their home. Their children are ugly. I don't want to be around them. Like, they would throw me out of their house immediately, and they should. And so the only concern for me is not the deportation of people who are treating the United States poorly while they're here under our good graces. My concern is, as you point out, that ultimately we only triggered this provision, it seems, when there was this protest for Israel. And, people have a right, especially Americans very much have a right to question that relationship if they feel it's necessary.
100%.
That said, no matter how you slice it, a lot of these pro-Palestinian groups are also anti-American. And so it makes sense that when people come in and they're trying to support those causes, they're going to overlap with a lot of anti-American beliefs. And unfortunately, in many cases, take actions that are violent, or they vandalize something. They otherwise involve themselves in a crime. And in so those cases, it makes perfect sense. Ultimately, I just want to deport people who shouldn't be here or who hate my country. The reason why the perfunctory thing that we have to go through, I'm a little less concerned. I do wish that there was a different, reason. I wish we had started on, say, anti-American protests, talking, the white evil colonial settlers. I wish we had started there, deporting people when they were, throwing those kind of protests around, when people had foreign flags, no matter where they're from, in these protests. But ultimately, the goal is to get people who hate my country out of my country. And to the extent that Rubio and the Trump administration are doing that, it seems positive. I just want them to widen the program, basically.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Because, I mean, you look at the anti-deportation protests, you always see the Palestinian flag, you see the rainbow flag, you see signs, no human is illegal, we live on stolen land. I mean, it's all conflated together. But unfortunately, from a narrative perspective, it all started with the anti-Israel protest and what they're doing to the Palestinian people, whether that's justified or not. Again, that's not what the point of our conversation is. This is just, I wish it did kind of started more holistically about, you don't like our country, you shouldn't get our education, and you should leave.
Yeah, again, it would be great if we just never had to care about this conflict ever. And the best way to do that is to never import the people who care about the conflict. They can
100%.
just stay over there and be very angry about the conflict wherever they're at. Like that,
Yep.
That's the easiest solution. So
Yep.
pick them up, put them back where they belong, and let them, protest Israel there. That's fine. It doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Nope.
So this opens us up to the larger question that you ask in your piece. And I think one that's really important is getting lost in the controversy because it's Israel versus Palestine. And for some reason, that's all we can care about. It's all we're allowed to care about. But I think the far more important question is, in this moment where so many Americans are struggling, so many Americans feel like they're stuck in a rut, they aren't getting the kind of socioeconomic advancement that they're hoping for. They feel like the opportunity that was promised to them, the prosperity for their posterity, is being stolen. In this moment, it's so clear that our universities are dominated by foreign students. You had some shocking statistics in your piece about the prevalence of foreign attendance in most universities. I mean, obviously, I went to university 20 years ago at this point, and even then, the prevalence was amazing. I had never met anyone from India or from the Middle East until I went to university, and then we were it was swimming in people from those areas of the world. What is the dynamic going on in American universities? How American are American universities at this point?
That's a great question. And that was actually one of the surprising parts of the piece when I was doing the research on the Rubio comments. I was like, okay, well, what is the scope of international students at these universities? I mean, it seems like, it's becoming a big deal, especially at Columbia. So then I started to look at Columbia, and I found that at Columbia University, you're talking about 55% of the entire student body, undergraduate and graduate, is international students. More than half. I'm like, this is an American university with more than half international students. And then you start to look deeper and you look at the elite universities. You look at NYU, 42% of their student body is international. You look at graduate programs from Princeton, 42% of their graduate programs are international. And then you look at, we're importing 1.1 million international students every year, which is up a little over 6% from last year. And part of that is because the student visa really has no cap. So basically, there's no cap on what they call F1 visas, and you can import basically as many as you want. And a lot of these universities are doing that because there's a financial incentive. First and foremost, international students pay full charge. They don't get access to the student loans, or they're not supposed to. So they get the full tuition. And then, of course, they also have their graduate programs, grants and things like that come from the government. So what they want to do is they want to get as much money as they can for these grants and these programs. So they want to widen the talent pool. So they recruit from all over the world. And of course, if you're recruiting from all over the world, now you're putting American students at a disadvantage, because American students have to compete with the entire world to attend an American university. And that's just patently unfair. And the last part of this is that you have a kind of elite university to corporate pipeline where, we're in the AI revolution, and tech sector is becoming bigger and more important in our economy. And these companies want to get labor that are in the STEM fields, but don't necessarily want to pay what would be considered American wages. So you have the H-1B visa. So these universities kind of supply the labor to these companies in big tech and whatnot. And now, so that's where you get this whole pipeline. You have the international component to it, and you have just American students are kind of on the outs because they're competing not just against international students, but they're competing against corporations that are trying to get the most for the least amount of money.
Again, there's so much there that I want to pull apart, but let's start at the beginning. The numbers are stunning. Over half of Columbia University,
Yep.
almost half of a number of these graduate programs that you're talking about. Yeah, it's an American university in name, but in name only, right? Like it's an international institution that's running on American tax dollars.
Correct.
And that's a huge problem. We are looking at an America First moment, a moment in which people are saying, I want to improve the lives of the people in my country. I would like the institutions in my country to work for me. I don't want them to work for Ukraine. I don't want them to work for Zimbabwe. I don't want them to work for Israel or Saudi Arabia or Iran or India. I want them to work for the people of the United States. And yet, some of the biggest and most important institutions, the ones that are critical gatekeepers for building up our nation, and most importantly, selecting our nation's elites, are dominated by foreign students. If the majority of the people who are being trained at some of the most prestigious universities in the United States to become the next elite ruling class of the United States are foreign, what does that say about the people who will be in charge of the institutions of the United States in 10, 15 years?
Absolutely. And with these programs too, there some programs in the STEM, if you graduate in the STEM fields, there's programs that allow these students to work within the United States for 36 months. It also, without any kind of corporate sponsorship, it also allows them to get kind of on a fast track for permanent residency. And then to your point, these are the people that are now going to be dominating the political elite from our American universities, and they're not American first and foremost. And it drastically changes the culture of the country. It changes everything, the social fabric, and all of this is because American universities are essentially not serving the American people.
Obviously, the focus has been illegal immigration. It's been great to see the numbers for illegal immigration crater. Obviously, we're seeing deportations occur slower, than many people would like, myself included, but they are happening. So there's been a lot of work on that front. The thing that has been concerning for some people, again, myself included, is that the pathways of legal citizenship that are cutouts, workarounds, loopholes aren't really thought about a lot. So the student visa, as you point out, is one of these that is very easy to exploit. There's really no cap on it. You can bring in a lot of people. A lot of people overstay the visa, so they become illegal immigrants in that sense, or they are put on a fast track, a pipeline. But remember, and people, this is something that a lot of people, especially on the left, just forget, but even some people on the right, a visa is not naturalization. A visa is a temporary pass to be in the United States. It is not a permanent invitation to join and become a part of the United States. And yet, many people say, well, as soon as I've got that visa, I'm working for the green card. I'm I'm going to get the job. I'm going to get in the pipeline. And the whole point is that this is basically just slow rolling a naturalization process. And when that's happening, again, these are people who aren't coming in. They're not coming to pick your fruit. They're not coming to clean your laundry or mow your lawn. These are people who are coming to get high value degrees and fill critical leadership positions. Now, some people might say, oh, well, we're taking the best and brightest from around the country. But what you're actually doing is taking slots at Columbia University that could be used to train Americans to be the best and brightest. And instead, you're pulling in people from foreign countries with foreign interests and saying, actually, we're going to train you to fill these critical roles that, you're going to end up in a large corporation, perhaps, as you point out, undercutting the wages of an American worker. And you have the scenario where not only are we're introducing competition into higher education, which is already a limiting factor for Americans to advance, we're reducing wages, and we're increasing a foreign element into the people who will influence our boardrooms, our classrooms, our media, and ultimately our politics.
Absolutely. And the two major countries that are a part of this are India and China. As a matter of fact, India, as of last year, they have over 330,000 students here on student visa, which is an increase of 21% from last year. China is actually second at around 270,000, which is actually down around 4%. But you can see when you're talking about the tech world, where the H-1B visa comes into play and the 21% increase from India, you can see that this is also very tech driven in that regard. And not just that, but corporations, they're coming into the country. They're training the people to work in the STEM fields. And then a lot of times you'll have these people that graduate are actually being trained by Americans at these companies, and they're training their replacements. So basically, they train the H-1B visa student, and then they get fired from their job. Or the people that come into the country for the education, they get the education and then they leave. Because there's another component to this where, around 41% of students stay in the country. But the far majority of, at least from the undergraduate perspective, they actually leave and they go back to their home countries. But the graduate programs, those are the ones that stay around. So to your point about the elites, those are the ones that are staying and really having an influence. But on the backside, you have around 17% of bachelor degree international students go back to their home country, basically. And then American companies outsource work to those people that we just gave an education to in their home countries. Yeah. It's a debacle.
Well, and I know people in exactly this situation. This isn't just some abstract set of statistics. I know multiple people in the tech field who say, I can't advance. There's no hope of me getting this type of job because either A, everyone in my company who is involved in this is basically involved in a ethnic supremacy ring. Like it's all people from the same ethnic background who came into the United States, and only Indians or whoever, qualifies is allowed to get hired into the jobs. Like, we just know that is a, it's like having the Italians are in charge of this part of the dock. Yep. It's the same mentality, but just in the tech world. And the other dynamic is exactly what you're talking about here, where they're like, yeah, I trained for this job. So did this other guy who went back to India, and now he's doing it at 30% less than I'm doing it. So all those jobs that he trained, that we trained them to do, they're now heading over there. And so we have this constant drain of jobs for people that we educated,
Yep.
to bring that over there. You touched on this briefly, but it's not just it's obviously not just volume. It's not just the love of the foreigner. There are financial incentives driving this decision by universities.
Yep.
You mentioned the fact that they're getting this full tuition. What are some of the other things that are ultimately driving the universities to select foreign students or make them a larger and larger part of their admissions classes?
Yeah, well, I think the two components that I found at least was, yes, you get the full freight. The international students pay the full tuition, which obviously helps. But because these universities and American universities are competing with each other for federal grants, federal funding, things of that nature, they want to attract from the biggest talent pool possible. So they're looking global as opposed to with just Americans. So if universities were to just focus on American students, which is what they should do, but if they were just to do that, well, they might lose out to other universities that are not doing that and getting a bigger talent pool, and then they get funding for research grants and things of that nature. And that's where, kind of going back to Columbia with Rubio, the Trump administration, is utilizing that money factor in terms of trying to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars from Columbia in order to get them to revamp some of their programs, to stop with the race-based hiring and things of that nature. So they're actually using that as leverage against the universities, which shows. And Columbia is acquiescing to this, much to the detriment of all the activists, because they don't like that they're bending over backwards to try to get this funding back, which shows you how important this money is to these universities.
What does this say about previous administrations, previous conservatives, previous Republican presidents, that this option was always on the table? Like,
Always.
these universities were always very heavily reliant on federal funding, our tax dollars. There was always the opportunity to pull this funding and correct this problem. And yet here we are, only just now seeing the tip of the iceberg about how this power could be wielded. Is it just being terrified of wielding power? Were the Republicans benefiting from this too? Is it just part of the liberal consensus? What was going on here? Why would they not take action like this beforehand?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, and you've discussed this in general, I think you have, left and right is kind of just a different brand of liberalism. So I think, in terms of we're a nation of immigrants, that whole narrative is something that both sides of the aisle really embraced up until the Trump administration. But I also think it may not be well, first of all, like, we know that Republicans also don't want to wield power to do anything. But then when we're talking about the education system, that is basically like a Democrat fortress from the top down. You talk about the Department of Education, the people that work in schools, the faculty, they're all Democrats, 70+%. You're talking about, in terms of donations to political parties, the far majority of political donations from whether it's from universities or things like Harvard or Columbia or the Department of Education prior to the dismantling of it, they all went to Democrats. As a matter of fact, in terms of the Department of Education, according to Open Secrets, 0% of any political donations from people that worked at the Department of Education went to Republicans. So there was a major incentive financially from the political standpoint, from the Democratic Party perspective, not to really infringe on the education sector.
I should say, before we go any further, for those watching, that this is pre-taped. So if you have any questions, normally we would love to take them, but we won't be able to do that because we're not live right now. I'm actually at the Right Response Ministries conference in Texas. So thanks everybody for watching. But if you have any questions, might want to save that for the next broadcast. So obviously we've talked about the economic problem here. We've talked about the lack of opportunity that's afforded to Americans because of this. We talk about the way in which the money is tangled up in this. However, something that doesn't seem to get talked about a lot, and really should, is the national security aspect of this, right? I'm told all the time that we are in an existential battle with China. China is coming for us, Adam. They are going to eat your lunch.
Mhm.
You're going to be completely controlled by the Chinese. We also hear Iran, very dangerous, right? And yet, student visas are open for all of these countries. Now,
Yep.
I understand that ultimately the people in the regime are not the same thing. There's plenty
Mhm.
of great Iranians, there's plenty of great Chinese people, but they don't have to be here. They're not Americans, right?
Nope.
Like so first, they don't need to be here. Second, if we're trying to reduce immigration, and these people are seriously an existential threat, then why are they here through our student visa program? We just had multiple Chinese nationals who were caught spying in the American military.
Hmm.
Obviously, again, that doesn't mean that everybody who comes from those countries is an agent of those governments. But ultimately, why would we expose ourselves to the possibility that we are bringing in possible national security threats? I mean, you think about the 9/11 hijackers, they were all educated, they're going to flight school, they came in on student visas legally for the most part, right? Like, we have seen this movie before, and it's a tragedy in this moment when we are trying to put America first, close our borders. Why are we admitting Chinese and Iranian and other students from hostile powers when A, they're just doing everything we talked about, taking up resources that could go to Americans, taking jobs that could go to Americans, but B, also introducing the possibility that we're bringing in spies, we're bringing in saboteurs, we're bringing in terrorists, or ultimately we're just bringing in people who don't share our beliefs. Why would we do that? Why would we not just close the student visa process to hostile countries?
I mean, it's a great question, and it's and you touched on this. It's not just the fact that you might be bringing in spies or people who are going to sabotage things or whatnot. We're actually a lot of times as I said, the Chinese student population last year was around 270,000 students. A lot of these students are working in dual use fields, with dual use meaning civilian and military purposes. So the fields that they're working in can subsequently help China's PLA, the People's Liberation Army. So a lot of times, even if they're not actually spies, they come to America, they get trained, they work at the Los Alamos laboratory and nuclear fields or whatnot, and then they go back. China knows where they worked, so they get recruited to now work on government projects and military projects, and we helped to facilitate that, which is ridiculous. Why would we be training people that we might have to fight down the road? And there's also the IP theft that comes into play, which and
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily need to be from a military perspective. People are stealing American ideas, and the reciprocity too, which is actually kind of funny. You have, I'm not saying, and I'm sure that there are some good Chinese universities. I mean, they are good at technology and they are good at doing things like that. But there's less than 1,000 Americans attending Chinese universities, and there's 270,000 Chinese students attending American universities. So obviously, they don't want us there really either.
I wonder how many Indian students are attending Chinese universities. I'm guessing that number is also
Right,
pretty low,
right.
despite that. And ultimately, this is an issue of brain drain
Yes.
too, right? Like, if we are bringing in the top IQ from all these other countries, then we are taking the people most likely to make innovations to improve the quality of that country.
Yes.
And we're also encouraging flight from that country because the
Yes.
country is going to get worse. There are fewer people, unless they're doing like you were saying and just coming here, getting educated, and then taking our jobs back to that country.
Right.
But in theory, if the advantageous model of immigration through education that we are sold is actually occurring, which we can debate that. But even in that abstract theory of how that should work, we are ultimately creating a situation where these countries become places that people need to flee because they're not functional. And so not only are we robbing our own people of the opportunity to be elevated, not only are we also making sure that our leadership, our elite class, is more and more dominated by foreigners with foreign interests, foreign traditions and beliefs, but finally, we are robbing foreign countries of their best and brightest in a situation that almost guarantees that once those countries end up collapsing, we get the economic migrants who start flooding over the border because, well, there's no one to run their state anymore. And all the educated people who would have run their country are in the US. So I guess that's where we'll go.
Yep. So you basically take the people that could best are the best suited to help turn their country around, you keep them here. And the stats prove this out, where over 75% of foreigners who are in the PhD programs, they stay in America. So they are not in their home countries. So then these countries suffer the brain drain. They don't get the people that are best suited to take care of their own countries. And then not only are we educating these people, but then, from a humanitarian perspective, we're always sending, America sends money everywhere. We're sending money back to those countries that cannot improve themselves. And then eventually, we end up sending in the military to take care of some warlord that is attacking a UN convoy of humanitarian aid. And then we're involved in that way. So, and all around, we're hurting Americans, and we're also indirectly hurting the countries that are sending the people here.
And, I had never really thought about this aspect of it, but of course it makes perfect sense. I was listening to Eric Weinstein. He gave a presentation at the ARC conference in London.
Mhm.
And I have no idea whether this claim he made is correct or not, because I'm not a theoretical physicist. But according to him, theoretical physics more or less got put in a cooler after the 1970s. And the main reason why is you couldn't have foreign students working on really dangerous cutting edge physics equations, because, well, if you discover the next nuclear bomb or something, you would basically just be putting spies for China or Iran or Russia or whoever in the room with you as you discover it, right? Which, again, I hadn't really considered that, but makes perfect sense. If you have an international coalition of students learning in a field, you have to be careful about what kind of breakthroughs you can actually make, because if you discover the new dangerous technology, everybody's in the room. There's no hiding it. There's no protecting your country. There's no putting the interest of your country first, because you've already exposed the research. Everyone's already involved. It's already out in the open. There's too many interests from too many foreign powers who are already in there. And so it reduces the amount of actual useful research you can do in cutting edge areas in these university settings, because ultimately, if you succeed in the goal of producing something dangerous or something very new that you don't understand the limits and the power of, you could be creating a disaster. And so you're actually limiting what science can be done, what research can be done, because ultimately there's always the chance that you're backdooring it to your enemies, because you constantly have people from those countries in the room when you're doing the research.
Yep, absolutely. And you like to think that the people that are in charge of bringing these people in would be thinking about this. But as we've seen with the espionage that's been going on and whatnot, they're probably not really thinking more about that than they should. And they should be thinking more about that. It's really important.
So, at some level, we know that this needs to see reform. We know that this system is broken. A lot of Americans who can't get who want an education can't get it. A lot of Americans who want an opportunity can't get it. We're creating a national security problem. We're creating a international leadership problem. We know that these things need to be addressed. At the same time, well, I love a lot of what Trump's doing. His rhetoric on this is often poor. He's right. He's like, everyone who gets through community college, staple a green card to their, to their diploma. I mean, give them
selling the citizenship card, right? The gold card, whatever.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of mixed messaging on this. That the results have been great, but ultimately you wonder how much they grasp the underlying problem. Again, a little concerning. They grasp it when it's Israel being attacked, but they don't seem to grasp the wider problem that's happening with the United States sometimes. Do you think the administration is looking at larger reform when it comes to these visas? And if not, what would you suggest? What do you think would be some of the first steps that we could take to fix this problem? Or are there ones you already see the administration taking that you're encouraged by?
Yeah, I do think the administration has signaled that it's not just about Israel, even if that was the catalyst for this. Rubio has pivoted some of the talking points. He was saying, listen, if you're here to undermine America, I don't care what cause it is, you got to get out of here. So, he, at least on the messaging, has kind of been forthright in that regard. Initially, not so much, but now I think he is. What kind of reforms? I think, unfortunately, the libertarian aspect of the Republican Party is still kind of has a hold on parts of the Trump administration when it comes to wanting to, get, best and the brightest. You want to bring everybody in. We're a sports team, that whole analogy. And, It's like, yeah, we're, but we want the best from our country. We don't want that. We're not a global conglomerate. We're not a company. We're a country. So I think in that regard, I think the administration needs more work on their messaging in that regard. But in terms of like what reforms can happen, I mean, I think the fact that the F1 visa is unlimited, I mean, I think having a limitation on the amount of people that you could bring in on a student visa would be pretty good. You can start there. You could also, in terms of schools that are getting federal funding, you maybe put a cap on the amount, the percentage of your student body that's international. I mean, there's no way that over 50% of a student's university student body should be international. You got to bring that down to some level. I don't know, 15%, 20%, whatever it is. I'm not an expert in that, but you can cap the percentage of international students at any given university or any given program. You can reduce the H-1B program in terms of how many visas you're allowed to get. And you can maybe give tax incentives to universities that hire Americans, or you can go after some of the endowments or do what the Trump administration is doing with Columbia in terms of withholding federal funding until you come more in line with a more of an American first policy. I mean, those are the things that I kind of research and things that I've been thinking about. But I mean, I think first and foremost, you just have to reduce the amount of students that come into the country.
Marco Rubio has been surprisingly good, I think, in this administration. I'm somebody who lived in Florida the vast majority of my life. I remember I was actually in the state capitol when Marco Rubio was giving speech when he became Speaker of the House at that time. So this is a guy who has a long history. Obviously, he's run for president, these kind of things. A lot of people have seen him more as a possible neoconservative, or at times he's had a little how do I say this? His Catholic sympathies have led him to to immigration statements that have been questionable, Gang of Eight style type stuff.
Yep.
Are you surprised to see this version of Marco Rubio? And if so, why do you think we got this version of Marco Rubio?
Yeah, I am surprised. I mean, because you remember the debates with little Marco, and I mean, he went really back at Trump a lot, back in 2016 and whatnot. And I think, I think good politicians can read the room. I think good politicians like Rubio can say, hey, listen, this American First thing is actually, has legs, and it's not just like the Tea Party, that kind of fad, if it was a fad, but got kind of taken over. But I think Rubio sees and reads the room. I think he understands the messaging that's coming from the administration. I think he's a savvy politician. I think that's kind of what it shows. And I think he's been really good for the administration. I mean, he said, in terms of immigration, he hasn't just said illegal immigration is a problem. He's point blank said immigration is a problem. And that's a messaging that you have not heard from any Republican in a while. It's always, we want you here, but we want you here illegally. And Marco Rubio, to his credit, has at least said, no, the immigration issue is the problem. It's the amount of immigration. And I think that's a good sign for us, at least, to have people like that in the administration.
Yeah, that's obviously a huge Overton window shift. And it's really easy to live in internet time, right? Like, it's really easy to do this thing where you've been talking about a problem for a long time, and so the fact that the current administration is just figuring it out makes it feel slow or something. But you have to think about where we were just a few years ago. Just a few years ago, the idea that legal immigration could be on the table, not just illegal immigration, but actual legal immigration. We could be saying, no, there's a justification for reducing that. There's a justification for possibly even putting a moratorium on that. It's not just about the process. It's not just about the legality. It's not just the formalism of the law. The United States is more than a legal entity. It is more than a set of rules that we follow. There is something specific and unique about the American character, and maybe there are a set number of people who can come in and integrate into that and become part of that story and part of that belief and part of that tradition. But that number is limited because the American people are real, right? It's not just a set of regulations that you step through. And that doesn't sound like a big shift if you haven't been, if you're like, oh, well, ultimately my goal is to have like, this super base state that is completely cognizant of like the nature of a nation and how it needs to control. I get it, but like that jump right there is
Mhm.
just huge, and it completely changes the game because now, as you point out, yeah, there are still a lot of people who are just talking illegal immigration, legal immigration, legal immigration. But before, if you had even touched the subject of legal immigration, you would have been a xenophobe. You would have been, you're a nativist, which is my favorite insult. Like, oh, I'm for the native
Yeah,
people of my
why wouldn't you
country,
be?
right? But yeah, so I'm very encouraged by that shift that you're pointing out there. I think it's critical that we're seeing it, and I think it's important for people to remember how much we've won. Yes, there's so much more work to do, absolutely. But the fact that we're here, and it just came out, the Trump administration was throwing out, a gang member, and people are like, oh well, he was a father, and like, yeah, he was a gang member. We don't care. He's gone. Like, just that approach is just so radically refreshing. It's great to see.
Absolutely, and JD Vance is leading the charge in this
Yes.
regard. I mean,
Yes.
he's going back and forth on at everybody on Twitter on this. I mean, he even said, the media leads with the, oh, he's a father, but yeah, but he was in 2019. He's in the country illegally. This MS-13 gang member or whatnot. He should have been deported. He wasn't. The procedural error was that maybe he shouldn't have gone to El Salvador or whatnot, but he should have been deported from the country. Maybe he shouldn't have been on that plane specifically. But JD Vance is saying, no, this guy is illegal. He shouldn't be here, first and foremost. And JD Vance has really been leading the charge on that. We're a people. I mean, he's one of the first politicians to talk about America as a people and not just an idea. And that is something, obviously, that you and I and a lot of other people have been talking about on Twitter. But it's nice to actually hear the people that we're voting for talk about it as well.
Yeah, and it's very clear. First, I want to make it clear. Actually, if you're a violent gangbanger, I don't care if you knocked someone up,
Yeah,
and I don't care where they take you out of this country. Like, really,
100%.
you're illegal. You're not supposed to be here.
Right.
The fact that whether or not you got deported to the right country, yeah, we'll make an effort to make sure you go to the right place.
Right.
But maybe try not being in my country illegally. Probably
Right.
maybe try not joining a
Right.
horrible gang that rapes people and traffics and drugs and kills people.
That's the issue.
Right. That is the much more important part of this.
Right.
But ultimately, the fact that guys like JD Vance are talking about this being a nation and that being the highest priority is huge. We know that there is some level of internal disagreement on this. We saw kind of the H-1B
Yeah.
side of the tech right take the bloody nose in that debate during kind of the Christmas season.
Thankfully.
But it's good to know that someone who is focused on that truth is so close to power. It does seem like the heir apparent of the administration, and is ultimately, I think, having a big influence on where it's going.
Absolutely. And I do hope he is the heir apparent, because really this can't be, I know Trump has said that he wants a third term, but this can't be a 4-year and done and then just give all the power back to the Democrats. We really need a good run of these types of ideas and the Overton window continuing to shift. We need this to continue for, I mean, God willing, forever, because we don't want the Democrats ever to get back in power. But in order to get a lot of these, the executive orders are great, but we need them to be more permanent, because as we've seen, like just with the 1776 commission, where, Trump put that in place, the education, getting back to the education that we talked about right in the beginning, he put that in place. The report comes out in 2020. Here's some recommendations for how to instill patriotism and tradition and actually counter the narratives of the 1619 Project. And then Biden gets into office and basically just shuts the whole thing down. So we really can't have that. So God willing, JD Vance or someone in that same mindset will take the mantle and kind of pick up where Trump left off.
Exactly. All right, Adam. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up here. But before we do, where can people find your work?
All right. Well, as you said, I have my own website, conquesttheory.com. You can find me on Twitter at Conquest Theory as well. And I write some articles for The Blaze, and I write some articles for The Federalist, so you can see me pop up. But for the most part, I do a lot of my work on Twitter, and then I'll link to all the other stuff.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, make sure that you're checking out Adam's work. Again, we are pre-recorded, so we can't go to the questions of the people here, but thank you as always for watching. If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you subscribe, click the bell and notifications so when we are live, you know when we're going live and you can catch those episodes. If you would like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And when you do, if you leave a rating or review, it really helps with the algorithm magic. And of course, if you would like to support this channel, you can head to shopblazemedia.com, click on the Auron MacIntyre collection, and there is merch there that you can pick up. We got the Brutal American t-shirt there recently. So if you'd like to do that, you'd like to pick up something and support the show, you can head over there. Thank you everybody for watching. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.